Well, how is, and welcome to Literary as Feck. Now, this week we're talking about 36 Chambers of Kung Fu Cinema, Volume 1 by BEY Logan. That last part wasn't even Irish. I don't know what the hell that it went wandering the territories there, that accent at the end.
I didn't talk, that is it.
Yes, so this is a result, I think, basically of me needing some sort of primer. I've never known how you say that.
Well, I say primer because primer just sounds stupid.
I agree. Yeah, but I have a feeling I have heard it pronounced.
Yeah, that's what Pamela Paul of the New York Times what's it called? The New York Times Book Review podcast says. She says primer as well.
Yep.
But it doesn't.
Let's stick with primer. Right.
Yeah.
So I had been looking for a primer on Kung Fu cinema as a result of being drawn into that seamy world by listening to these two mad Welshmen and a podcast that they have where they talk. And so that was my first, I guess they were my first primer. And then I don't know if it was you or Darren who first brought up, it might have been you that brought up that BEY Logan had written this book. And I had heard
I think it was me, yeah, because I'd the only time I've ever seen it in the wild, because we ended up reading a Kindle version of this because we couldn't actually get a
paper one.
Yeah, but when I was in Hong Kong in, I guess, 2019, I was in like a what would you call it, kind of like a kind of a bit of a touristy knick-knack, you know, bits and pieces store somewhere down in near Central, I think. And yeah, they had a copy of this book, and of course I figured, oh well, I'm not going to buy this big heavy book and carry it around with me. I'm sure it'll be able to buy online, you know. And then turns out no, only in digital form. So the only time I've ever actually seen a physical book was my very interesting visit to Hong Kong, where I got tear gassed as part of the protests. It was fascinating. I'm glad I got to go to Hong Kong one time before, sadly, the curtain seems to be coming down on it. Did you ever get a chance to go there?
No.
Right.
But you know, my wife is convinced that your wife is trying to kill you. Because every vacation you go on is to the deepest jungles of Borneo to meet headhunters, or you know, to get gassed in so she's like,
you may be onto something.
Clearly she has taken out some massive life insurance policy.
But
on you.
Indestructible because I watched every episode of Captain Scarlet as a child, and
well, there you go.
And the result is that you become invulnerable to these things.
Okay.
Yeah, no, but it was fascinating to go, having been interested in Hong Kong and Kung Fu cinema for so long. It's just fascinating to see like how small Hong Kong is, and consider how many films are shot there, and it doesn't all look the same.
Right. And
just something about, like, until you've been there, you don't realize how much of the city is traversed by like walkways, elevated walkways, and then once you walk the city on these walkways, and then you watch films set in Hong Kong and you see people on the walkways, you know, it's just, you just become more familiar and you get more out of the film. So I was very glad I did get to visit this very important to me cinematic city before the filthy commies took it away, which seems to be sadly what's going on.
And so BEY Logan, we had watched Ninja in the Dragon's Den, and he did the commentary track.
Right.
And so that's where and I think that it might have partly come out of that you said, well, because it is a very good, and apparently he's done a number of very good commentaries on it.
Fucking loads, yeah. His commentary tracks are always worth listening to.
So should we get ahead of it right now and just say that he was implicated in the Harvey Weinstein
You couldn't wait. You couldn't.
Me Too scandal, and just you know, I mean, I think maybe just get upfront say that yes, he appears to have wrecked his marriage and
he has
kind
been
of
cancelled. He has been cancelled.
Yes, officially, yeah. And there's every now and again there's a tiny hint in the book that you're like a slightly off color remark. You're like, oh yeah, okay, I can kind of see how you might have been an Englishman in a place where you could maybe get away with some.
But if you've been paying attention, Nick, I've been seeding those through these series of podcasts.
Yeah, I'm well aware. But anyway.
But no, yeah. So yeah, he has been. I don't know if he's actually been found guilty of anything or stood trial.
No, I think it's just
there's accusations, and since he's kind of backed off of public life to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Apparently, he's still fairly active in mainland China, where I guess these
things don't matter.
Really penetrated or really made much difference. But yeah, no, I don't think it's therefore necessary for us to throw our Kindles out and
no, this is not a baby in a bathwater situation, because I mean I wanted to read a book that kind of and you know what's shocking to me and embarrassing to me is how few of these movies I've actually seen, and I think that's where we're going to differ. I would imagine that you've seen most or all of the films.
All of them, yeah,
and I have not. I've seen a scant handful of the movies in this, including some that I really should have seen by now, like the original Drunken Master.
Right, so okay.
It was a reminder. It was a reminder of like, this is a good, you know, after I'm done with all of the movies that from Huckafus, then
yes.
this is another list maybe to just go through and make sure I've.
Or to be honest, maybe the other way around might be better, because I think he covers a lot more groundwork stuff, which, I mean, I don't know when we'll get round to Drunken Master, just because it just seems like something very well.
Yes.
So you should probably do it the other way around now.
Okay. All right. But from my perspective, I learned lots. And one of the things that you just mentioned that really interested me about Hong Kong itself was he talks quite a bit about how close the countryside was at the time, that like the Shaw Brothers movies were being made in the 60s, that there was all of this kind of like, fairly natural, before they kind of moved into shooting everything in studio,
the new territories,
and that he kind of talks, as the book goes on, he kind of talks about how there isn't much of that left. That's a lot of that nature is kind of being swallowed up by the city now.
Which is, maybe why in all those IFD films, ninjas fight in children's playgrounds as opposed to fields. Or, it's something I always get a kick out of, ninjas jumping around in like slides and swings and things in the background.
But yes, so I mean, he begins with Fist of Fury. He takes that as kind of his starting point, and I think that's probably mostly because that, for a lot of Westerners, would be like a touchstone. One of the first. It would have been certainly one of the first kung fu movies I ever saw.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting as well. There is a. I think because I'm probably a bit too young to it. There's a certain level of hero status afforded Bruce Lee in general and in this book as well, which I've never been totally able to 100%. It's not that I disregard Bruce Lee. I certainly understand the legacy and the importance, and especially for non-white Europeans as well. It's even more substantial, I think, because people were seeing someone who looked a bit more like them, kicking ass and taking names, right? And but in general, the whole thing, he was the hero of the 9-stone weakling and all that, and so I get it, but for whatever reason, and Darren feels pretty much the same, I think, just for us, just as cinema, as film, kung fu cinema. They've never I mean, I saw Enter the Dragon and loved it when it was on TV when I was a kid. In fact, I think it might have been one of those ones where they accidentally showed the uncut version with the nunchaku and everything, because I remember seeing that.
That's such a weird. I mean, I don't want to go too far aside there, but I'm fascinated by the fact that like nunchucks were a banned thing in England,
right?
To the point where you couldn't even call them the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles; they were retitled the Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles, and and I think they just took out Michelangelo's nunchucks somehow.
Hero Turtles. You could always slightly hear the theme tune was
it had been doctored, but I mean, of the four of them, Michelangelo's weapon of choice was the nunchuck. So did they reanimate it, or?
I can't remember.
Anyway,
to be honest, I hated the Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles, so I don't really remember.
I just don't understand what it was that the British Board of Censors had against nunchucks.
You mentioned the nunchucks famously. It's actually a good question about the guy. I genuinely don't remember, but they did apparently, when the first film came out in the UK, they accidentally, there's a scene where one of them, maybe the one you mentioned, fights with a string of sausages like their nunchucks.
Oh, okay.
And apparently they actually cut it out and then put it back in when someone pointed out that's just some sausages. Yeah, you can't, kids up and down the land will be using sausages to kill each other.
Nunchucks, yeah.
But just before I complete my thought, before I finish it, so just from a cinematic point of view, none of the Bruce Lee films, including Fist of Fury, really, they're not in my list of.
No, I do. I have a very soft spot for Enter the Dragon, and I think maybe for the same. I just saw it at a particularly impressionable age.
Well, it's a fun film. It's a good film.
And it also has John Saxon and Jim Kelly and Bruce Lee. It's a triple threat of awesome 70s dudes.
Yeah,
and Bolo's in it,
exactly. So that's probably the most overall fun one, I think. But I understand why Fist of Fury is. It feels more like eating all the vegetables on your plate more than it's not a bad film, but it's not, for me. I
assume too there's a perverse part of you and Darren that's the same perverse part of me that, for example, I prefer Sergio Solima and Sergio Corbucci over Sergio Leone, and so therefore Bruce Lee and Bruce Lee somehow outrank Bruce Lee in your mind.
Oh yeah, well, I've certainly probably spent more time researching and watching those guys, and just because there's more films, right? I mean,
But yeah, so I mean, the movies, I don't know if we should just quickly go through. I mean, Hapkido, I have not seen.
Okay.
And that's looks interesting.
Well, the thing that he mentions it actually in the book, and it's the version that I watched where I guess they when they first dubbed it, they replaced all the mention of Hapkido. They just said Kung Fu, and then when they dubbed it back to make sure it's, but again, like the Hero Turtles, but it's really, really amplified. So it's someone's like, well, he was studying Hapkido, and then someone came, like every time it's this really loud Hapkido. It's quite hilarious. So that version is worth watching, even if it takes out the film a little bit.
And that's Angela Mao.
Yeah, Angela Mao and Carter Wong, and it's always been one of my favorites. And my wife quite fancies Carter Wong as well. Okay. Carter Wong is basically he's the guy who inflates and explodes in Big Trouble in Little China.
Oh yes, yeah. And then we talk about some of the Jimmy Wang Yu movies. I mean, for me, it was interesting as the book went on. There was more and more of, like, for some of them, like for Fist of Fury, there like it felt more like it was a research. Like he had kind of he had gone back and like read about this, but later it was more of him in the book. There was more of this is a story I heard. Like there's a great story about him driving Gordon Liu around like somewhere depressing in England on some failed attempt to get people to come and and then a car going off the road and then running over and pulling the guy and he turns out to be a Black American who has passed out and wakes up and then
Yeah, Master Killer stood over.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's just
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, unless there are some highlight titles you want to mention that you enjoy. I don't know if we necessarily have to.
Yeah, but no, for sure.
Talk about all the. I mean, it's interesting. At the end of the book, he mentions in volume 2, because we are only talking about volume 1. It's when he first started becoming part of the industry himself. So there's a lot more first-hand, behind-the-scenes information and stuff. So I'm quite keen to read volume because I think I think that plays to his strengths more because the problem overall I would say this is a good book, and and like you said, to your point, if you're looking for a primer, it's a very good book as well. So overall I'm favorable towards this book. But if I'm going to talk about things about it I don't like, so number one, it needed one more edit. I think it needs someone to go through and take out.
Yes, certain stories come up
again and again,
3 or 4 times. Like the number of times I heard about Sammo Hung's
grandmother,
you know, and like there
was and this person's sister used to be I know you just told me.
Just told us that, yes.
So there's that. The other thing as well, and this isn't to his detriment because this is weirdly, I'm surprised how smoothly it read, because it does pretty much feel like someone's gone back and listened to their DVD commentary and
sort of semi-transcribed them.
But that's not necessary. I mean, it's not a book to read. I mean, we chose, you know, for this, it's not necessarily a book you're going to read. I mean, we read it cover to cover, but I don't think it works as, it's probably best.
No, it's better to dip into it. Yeah. It almost felt like a series of essays.
Film, read the essay,
that were written years apart, and so he had forgotten that he'd already told. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
But I like the fact that it had a strange. It was in the strange liminal space between written for fans by a fan, but also by a professional or a semi-professional. Like it was, you know, like he's somebody who has this long history with it, but he's clearly still very much a fan. Like right. Like,
I appreciate his enthusiasm, and I think that's what saves sometimes it tipping over to it really has a tone of this kind of genuinely false modesty, where you get the feeling that what he's really thinking is, I'm pretty awesome. I'm
a lot, but you know, but I mean that obviously he comes by the name dropping. Honestly, like he does actually know these people. He has worked with them, right?
No, it's not so much the name dropping so much as like the little things, like in the last chapter when he's talking about Marshall Club, and he's talking about when they were making the sequel to Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and which is terrible. And and
he's boasting about a few things now that you're like,
and the director's like, oh, I couldn't quite remember the name of that film.
Oh yeah,
he's the guy. Of course, the foreigner knows, and it's it's couched in that way where it's that false kind of, but it's actually like I knew.
It's a humble brag.
Yeah,
a humble brag. But at the same point, it's also true, as you well know, living in Japan, being somebody I constantly had people just nonplussed by my knowledge of old Japanese movies.
Right, things they didn't
like why do you care? Yeah.
And,
you know, I had some of my best conversations in the whole time I was there with like men in their 60s, like just they would meet on the streets, you know, who happened to be able to speak English for whatever reason. I remember having a great wandering around my neighborhood talking to these 2 old codgers, one who didn't have any English and the other who'd worked in a bank for years.
Right.
And the whole time just talking about Katsu Shintaro. And
yes, I could just imagine that your co-workers who are busy chasing tail the whole time, just looking over like, why is Nick hanging out with old dudes?
Exactly. He came to Japan for the wrong reasons.
What's wrong with it? But so there's that. BEY Logan as well, and again, I'm not having a go at him because I do have a great.
He might be able to kick your ass, judging by.
I have a great amount of respect, and I do like his commentaries. But he shouldn't ever try and be funny.
Okay.
All his gags, like they like. I'm quite glad he doesn't do that too often.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
he has a crack at it every now and again, but he's not funny, so he shouldn't do that. But no, honestly, I do think this is quite a good book to have by your side. And watch the film. Watch the film. Read the chapter. Watch the film.
Yeah,
the
I think that's how I'll approach it on my second read, and then
yes.
I'll be definitely interested in reading the second volume as well.
Yes, I think I'll get it, and hopefully there'll be a few more things in it I haven't seen, so I can. But still, even though I'd seen this film, there were definitely nuggets of information that I wasn't familiar with, especially when it came to connecting cinematic kung fu to real life discipline. That's stuff that often, flies over my head, to be honest with you. So when he says like, oh no, this is not only just good, this is not only good cinematic kung fu, it's also extremely representative of
that style.
That stuff I'm very pleased to hear about, because I probably wouldn't know that. I'd never pick up on that in a million years.
And I know a while ago you were talking about, or maybe I can't remember if it was you or if it was Darren, we're talking about Evergreen, right? This book that is kind of where a lot of this stuff seems to have come out of. Like there's this old Chinese novel, but like nobody seems to be able to find a copy of it translated into English. But a lot of these stories of the Shaolin and the Shaolin Temple and the beginnings, I think Evergreen is it. Yep, I think that's what I think. It comes up in this book a couple of times, and then I looked it up, and then it does seem to be like the only source of like.
Okay, I it's not ringing a bell, but then again, my brain isn't what it used to be. Maybe Darren's talking about it.
Okay. But it made me want to read it. But
Did I stop that?
It's one of those. No, it's one of those things that I think when I did even a cursory dig, it was like I couldn't find any sign of it having ever been translated into English. So, but it seems weird that it wouldn't have if it has all of this Shaolin-y, Wu-Tang-y stuff in it.
Right. No, I mean a lot of the roots of this stuff is quite you peter out before you get anywhere near it. I've tried running some things down before, just because I've been watching a film and this has led to that and this has led to that, and then it does just seem to go into the mists of time and legend. We're not sure if the person really existed or not, and which for me is I'm more interested if I was ever going to teach myself ancient Chinese texts or something, I'd be more interested in finding out like where did this hopping vampire thing come from, or if you ram an egg up a chicken's ass and then cut his head off and spit the blood onto a mirror, is that a real thing? Is this something that people used to do? Or that stuff is.
I guess one last question, maybe before we wrap up, is: have you seen many of these Wong Fei-hung movies, these older ones that he talks about? There's tons of them apparently. Right? I'm interested. This kind of
I'm not exactly sure how many of them are extant.
Right.
Certainly a few of them are, but then of those few, I'm not quite sure how many are commercially available. But there is one or two, I think, on YouTube.
Okay.
But I've never got round to it. But I'm certainly interested to see them. But again, I'm slightly trepidatious because, again, I feel as if they may be fascinating relics, but I'm not quite sure if
great films. Yeah.
But they might be. You never know. I'm certainly interested to have a look one day. There's a lot.
Right. I mean, the thing is, I think I can certainly say for what the purpose that I bought it for, it served the purpose well. I think it's definitely something I could easily recommend. If you're okay with supporting somebody who may or may not be.
It's fine. But it is one more piece of evidence to hold up the theory that you don't want to be making friends with Steven Seagal.
Yes, that never ends well.
No, stay away from Steven.
Talk about a man who has no sense of humor.
Yeah, he wouldn't take too kindly. He'd yeah, he'd threaten me in that whisper voice of his. Right.
Nice.
See you then.
All right.